It is Tuesday, April the 23rd, and you are locked on to the Sportsline Podcast on the CHCH News Podcast site. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Well, the focus, as you do know, athletes, executives, officials, teams, and broadcasters who hail from Southern Ontario and have become a success. Today's guest, a true three-tool player from the media world. A journalist at heart, this Hamiltonian has been a contributor in the Canadian media business for nearly 4 decades. In addition to being an award-winning columnist at the Toronto Star, Damien Cox took his talents to radio, television, informing and entertaining, and at times provoking readers, listeners, and viewers on a wide range of sports and personalities. In addition, he's passionate about long-form storytelling, and his latest book, Revival, will make any Maple Leafs fan emotional. Damien Cox, I feel really lucky right now that you come and join me. I know you're a big-time player. You didn't need to come here, so thank you for checking us out here. And I know that people that know your roots, you're back in Steeltown. That's got to feel good.
Yeah, you know, it really does feel good. And it's funny, since I left, which whenever that was, I haven't had a lot of things to do other than covering some Hamilton Tiger Cat games. I remember covering the Canada Cup in '87, if you can believe that. So there have been a few things. So to be able to come back here and chat with you and talk a little bit about my roots is kind of fun. I'm excited.
Hey, you know, talk to me about that Hamilton roots. I mean, you do come from here. Your roots are here. What was a young Damien Cox like?
He wore thick glasses, had a lot of hair.
Wow.
And grew up on the mountain, went to, Brantdale, Norwood Park, Westmount, Southmount, and then...
Did they kick you out?
No, they let me, they continued. And then 4 years at Mac. So lived here for a long period of time before heading down the highway to Toronto, as a lot of people do. And... I have lots of friends still in Hamilton, and I go back. My dentist is in Hamilton. One of my daughters lives in Hamilton. So the roots are still there. I drive around, and sometimes I'm taken by how much it's changed, and sometimes I'm taken by, geez, it feels the same in so many ways. I just can't get the streets downtown. Now they're more two-way streets and not just one-way. I can't, some of that freaks me out. And it still freaks me out how they turned the football stadium around. I go in there and I'm completely disoriented because I started going there in the mid-1970s for high school games. Mm-hmm. And, well, actually, even before that, went to some Tiger Cat games around the Jerry Williams era. A friend up the street, he had a Tiger Cat living next door, and they had season tickets, so would go to those occasionally. So I wish they'd turn the stadium back, but I don't think they're going to.
No, they're staying a little bit late. It's amazing. After all that debate, put it up on the mountain, put it down by the water, put it in Burlington, put it by the GO station in Aldershot, and all they did was put it on the same spot and turn it. It has to be. I mean, you've traveled all over the place. It's got to be, if not the only, one of the last stadiums in a residential area.
Boy, that's a great question. I haven't been to, I'm just going through my mind. Of course, the Alouettes play in McGill, and that's in the middle of a university / residential situation. So I still love the setting. I really do love the setting where the stadium is. It's a nice stadium. I wouldn't have ever dreamed they'd be able to build a new one. And yet they build new ones at Canadian Football League cities across the country, which is, I think, how we hope the league will survive and flourish because they have these new buildings. So I'm proud that they were able to build a new one. I just wish somewhere along the line they'd been able to build an appropriate hockey arena. And I always thought the best thing would have been to have one shared between a junior team and a McMaster University team. Mm-hmm. Because I remember going to MAC games when they had great players like Rick Master Louisi and stuff like that. in the late 70s and early 80s, and they had a big hockey following, and then no hockey at Mac, no women's hockey, no men's hockey. So maybe one day somebody will build that stadium, and we'll see what happens.
Well, it would be nice for it to have it back. You know, maybe they play at the Anderchuk Arena up in the mountain. That would be a place I would think of. But you're right, because Brock is thriving right now, Brock University, with their hockey program, and there's really no reason why Mac shouldn't have hockey as well, too, based on its history. You know, you do talk about the Tiger Cats, but I'm going to play a little video for you, and I just want you to tell me what you think about when you watch this video. Okay. Let's go ahead, Laura. What do you think about this when you see this?
Well, I mean, Angelo Mosca was such a figure in Hamilton football at the time. I started sort of, there, and that's the '72 Grey Cup. He and Garney Henley, I assume, and he was such a figure in the city at the time. And the neat thing, and of course, then he went on to do wrestling, which I saw him do as well. And then his son did wrestling. He was a wrestler as well. So the neat thing for me with Angelo Mosca, which I sort of, found out or learned later, was that he went to the University of Notre Dame, and I'm a big Notre Dame fan. So he was a star there before he came to Hamilton. And I think he epitomized Hamilton's rough and tough football style. So I would guess you would call him, there's that late hit, that's right.
which led to this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. I'm trying to remember I think I was there for that.
I think this was in Vancouver.
Yeah, well, I was definitely at that Grey Cup.
Oh,
my. That's Joe Cap, right?
Yep. Right down to the very end, these guys.
Yeah, well, and Angelo knew how to put on a show, and he was such a presence when he was around. He was one of those guys. So I think he's missed, and I think the football player who lived around the corner from me was on that '72 team. That was Dave Fleming. Mm-hmm. My parents grew up and they knew Don Sutherland, who punted for the Tiger Cats.
Sudsy.
Yeah. There were different guys, but it was different then. They were in the community. You knew guys who lived, around the corner. Maybe that's still the case in some areas. I don't know. But it was a really interesting time to be a Tiger Cat fan. And, I always remember being able to, after the game, you could run on the field and throw the football around and do stuff like that. They don't let you do that anymore.
No.
But another era, another time.
Speaking about that other era, we talk about, the young Damien Cox, and obviously you have gone on, you've written books, you've written, I don't know, thousands, maybe millions of columns in your lifetime. The passion for writing, where'd that come from?
I think probably the fact that I read voraciously as a kid. I read a lot of books. I was a hockey fan in a household. My parents were English immigrants. There were 6 of us. I was really the only one who was super keen on sports. I used to watch it all. I remember watching Secretariat win the Triple Crown. I wasn't even a horse racing fan, but that was on TV. I'd watch everything that was on TV. So I always wrote and did stuff, but I really didn't have a direction. Even when I was at Mac, I wasn't really thinking of that. And then I had sort of a choice of I could go to law school or I could go to journalism school. I'll always remember the disappointment in my parents' face when I told them I was going to go to journalism school and not law school. And I think it was really then that a lot of things came together and I began to become more passionate about writing. There was also a professor at McMaster whose father had been a foreign correspondent for the Globe and Mail. The professor's name was Kim Nossel. A lot of people at Mac will remember him. And he's still around. We chat now and then. And he was so passionate about his father, and he really pushed me in that direction. And it was when I got there that I really got into it. I wasn't thinking of sports, though. I was sort of thinking about politics, maybe one day, being a foreign correspondent. But, fate took me in another direction. That's where I went.
And sports has been just synonymous with you and writing and being a part of that game. And I know as you said, you're a hockey guy, but you've covered so much over your career especially in those earlier days. And I really got to, I guess, see you in my sort of closeout days at Sportsnet. There was something that happened, I'm going to say probably in the early 2000s, where it seemed to me where the national sports networks were gobbling up all the columnists.
Yeah.
From all, it could be, I don't know, Mark Spector in Edmonton, you, Brunt, like, I don't know what happened. Like, what was going on there? Radio as well, too.
Yeah. No,
which had to be great for you guys.
It was really great. I mean, it made everything in the end, because when I started out, I was a newspaper writer. When I started covering the Leafs in 1989, that's all I did. And then sometime soon after that, radio started. I guess it would have been 91. But there were not guys who were in the newspaper business did not really go. I mean, Dick Beddoes, he did some. They had a panel show, a TV panel show at one time during the 60s and 70s, but there wasn't a lot of crossover on a regular basis. So, I mean, I feel like in that way I was a little bit at the cutting edge of things, in that I got a chance to do full-time radio in 92. Gord Stellick and I had a show. And then that just seemed to snowball. That at that time, the networks believed for credibility, they needed people from newspapers. It seems kind of funny now when you look back, because newspapers have changed so much, the networks have changed so much, and they don't, it doesn't work quite that way anyway. So, I mean, lucky for me, it did. And so I started doing more radio and then some TV, a lot of TSN. And then I was lucky that there was competition when Keith Pelly came to Sportsnet. I guess that would have been 2010. Does that sound right? 2011. He really wanted to compete with TSN, having been at TSN. And so, as you know, when you get a couple of people who are interested in your services, you can end up doing fairly well. So I think it's changed now, though, because I think the networks now, they really are focused on former athletes, former players, doing a lot of their analytics or analysis in their work. But there's still some people out there doing stuff. But you're right. I think during the early 2000s, the idea was if you wanted to be credible, you needed someone who was in newspapers. It seems funny looking back now, but that's the way it was.
And it was funny because I could think of a lot of television people who will remain silent, who weren't happy with this because they weren't given the opportunities. And let's be honest,
the other way.
I think exactly, to go the other way.
Absolutely.
And you're right in the sense that a lot of columnists, and you're right. I think it did add credibility. That's just my opinion. I agree with what Scott Moore did, but it had to be the right people, right? You had to be able to translate because let's be honest, columnists can write, but not every columnist can speak properly on radio or have a personality on television.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the dynamic got all kind of messed up for at least some TV people. You, on the other hand, were very good. I'm not stroking you here, but I'm just telling you the truth, and that's why you lasted, right? And that had to feel good. Now, was that a tough transition for you?
Not really. I mean, there was some learning to do, but at the same time, there really wasn't a whole lot of training. You either swam or sank, and so you just jumped in. Radio really helped because you learned how to argue on radio. You learned how to tell a story on radio. You learned how to stir people's emotions and figure out what people might be interested in. And at that time, I think, there was also a real interest in people. I remember this being at TSN. They were happy for me to come on and say things that a lot of their people wouldn't say because I wasn't working for them. And I think that they saw people in the newspaper business who could stir things up and be a bit controversial. And so, those people were kind of in demand. Those things I felt very comfortable doing. Other things, and particularly in radio, more television. I was thrilled to get an opportunity to be on Hockey Night in Canada for a couple of years. I don't think that was my best work. I think that was a challenge to learn how to work in 45-second segments with two other panelists and find, be able to do the same kind of work. So I think I liked the long form, doing Sunday mornings with Dave Hodge. I really enjoyed that kind of stuff.
The reporter show.
Yeah, so I think I was more comfortable doing longer form stuff. Did a little bit of interviews and documentaries, but not as much as I would have liked. So, it was wonderful to get the chance to do so many different things. Some of them I was better at than other things. Some of them I enjoyed more, but a lot of good people too. I mean, a lot of the same people I do.
Yep.
And a lot of good people. I would say 90% of which were good teammates and guys who wanted to see you succeed as well as succeed themselves. And that's what made it fun.
I'm going to name 2 names from those days, and then you can just say what you want. Bob McCallum.
Everybody always asks me about
How can you not?
Bobcat.
How can you not?
Yeah, well, I mean, as talented as anybody, right? And smart. And, he really understood, I think, I think he understood something that's gone a bit missing today, and that is, it's not about being right, and it's not about being even accurate all the time, but let's stir things up. Let's get our passions going. Let's have some back and forth. And let's not just be the people who just reprint press releases and whatever the team say, that's fine with us. And so to be a little cynical, to be a little suspicious, talented as a broadcaster, primarily, very talented as a broadcaster. And it's funny. He and I, there were, I don't know how many, I think I was hired and fired 3 times as his co-host. When you were in with Bob, you were in, and it was great work. When Bob had enough of you for a while and decided there was somebody else, you were out. And so, it was one of those up and down kind of relationships for me. But, I mean, I feel really confident in saying, Bob's one of the greats of sports media history in this country, and so I'm thrilled to be able to say I got a chance to work with him.
Well, I'll tell you this from my standpoint, and I say this as a sports fan, but even more so as a broadcaster. Friday from 5 to 7.
Yeah.
Like that's appointment radio listening.
It was wonderful.
It was fantastic, and the guests that you guys would have, best in the nation, best conversations, all topics covered. Nothing spared. Like it or not, opinions. We don't have radio like that anymore. I'm sorry. No offense to the people that are working in the radio right now, and I know I'm going off maybe like a 57-year-old man right now, but that kind of radio is missing in our lives right now, and I don't want to say it bothers me, but it bothers me a little bit.
It bothers me a little bit too, and I think guys aren't being, and women, a lot more women in the business now, aren't necessarily being given the same opportunities. I'm like you. I don't want to be the guy who's sort of looking back and saying, oh, in my day it was great, and now it all sucks. And I don't feel that way. And it's funny, when you bring up Friday afternoons at 5 to 7, that's when we do our roundtables usually. And it was... I don't think about it now, and when you bring it up now, I'm thinking, oh man, did we have a lot of great memories doing that. And we'd get into it, and it was fun, and it was excellent radio. The numbers were great in those days. It was exciting to be part of something like that. I mean, Bob was the star, and everybody knew Bob was the star, but he always made sure there was enough room for other people to carve their personalities and be part of the show. So, I don't know. Here's the other thing, though. Like, you would listen to primetime sports in those days because, you wanted to know, was there a trade? Did somebody make a trade? And what happened? There are so many outlets, this podcast, social media, all kinds of stuff that people go to and can get their information as quickly as they want it. So I think that's really changed.
But how credible are some of those sources?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. And I really believe that we have to trust in the listener, the viewer, the whatever, to be able to sort that out. But waiting for a radio show to tell you what's happening, those days are gone.
glad I lived it.
Yeah,
glad
me
I
too.
saw it.
Me too.
It was fantastic radio. And like I said, that was I don't care if I was in my car or I was at home. I don't care what I was doing. I had to, and you couldn't record it, so you had to be there listening. Second name, Gord Stellick.
My buddy.
Your buddy.
Gord and I first met on a plane from Toronto to Saskatoon or Regina. Anyways, we were going for the Memorial Cup 1989. Mm-hmm. I had just or recently begun on the sports beat, a hockey beat for the Toronto Star. I was so excited. And Gord was in his second year as general manager of the Leafs. And so in those days, you just walk on and they were all there. They're flying commercial just like you are. So I end up, talking to Gord and interviewing him. And he's telling me, there's this guy. But there's this Swedish guy named Matt Sundin that a lot of people are talking. And I wrote, Matt Sundin. That's got to be important. Matt Sundin. Okay, Swedish guy. Because remember back then, it was mostly still Canadian players that were being drafted in the top rounds. So Matt Sundin, he's guy. And then I said, so, and what's, your coach, George Armstrong? And he said, well, he doesn't really want to be the coach. And I said, he doesn't want to be the coach? Yeah, he says, go up and ask him. And George, the legend, George Armstrong, is sitting up there. So I figure out a way to get up there, go sit down beside him and start talking to him. You don't want to coach the team? No, I don't want to coach the team. But Mr. Ballard, I'm worried how he'll react. And, I've been working for the team. I get the salary. I've got a pen. I don't want to lose those things. And this is my introduction to Maple Leaf hockey.
Unbelievable.
Right? That they're going. And the funny thing was, too, that was the same draft. That was the draft the Leafs took. I'm spinning. You can hear the rubber burning or smell the rubber burning as I'm trying to remember. That was the draft the Leafs took Scott Thornton third.
Thornton, okay, that's right.
And ended up taking two more members of the Belleville Bulls, right? Mm-hmm. And the joke was that's the only team they'd really scouted back then because the Leafs weren't a very sophisticated organization at that time. So that was my introduction to it all, and that was my introduction to Gord Stellick. He left soon after, went to New York. We talked then, and then we ended up doing some radio together when he came back from New York. And then we did a book together. And that's what was fun about this book, this newest book, is it was kind of a chance for not just Gord and I, but some other people we'd worked with in the editing and publishing business to work together again. It was a chance for us to, as we said, to get the band back together. I mean, Gord's one of the great people I know, great family guy. We've known it. We still laugh at the same jokes.
That's when you know you're good pals.
We may not.
Look at you two.
We may not talk. How come he looks so young? That's Christine Simpson in the middle. That was
who I love. Can we just say this right now? She is the queen of hockey for me. I love her.
Oh, man.
I remember working with her at Sportsnet with the short hair back then. Her sit downs, and you can understand this. Again, given the short amount of time that she has to deal with, those sit-downs and whoever she's working with in terms of an editor, they're top-notch.
Well, Christine loves hockey, and she loves hockey people, and she's a very emotional person, and I think that comes across really well in her interviews, that she cares. She really cares about the game and the people in the game and stuff. So, got to work with her lots and lots and lots, which was fun. And you saw Gord there, and he's broadcasting, he's working, he's doing lots of different stuff. So our careers have kind of intersected from time to time, and then he's gone off and done his thing, and I've gone off and done my thing. So, we'll be friends for life, and it all started on that plane ride out to the Memorial Cup.
Great story. And I can feel it. I can hear it when you guys do the radio together. There's a brohood going on between the two of you. You know how to poke and, prod and poke each other just enough.
See, and that's the problem, is that he and I have talked about, maybe we should do a podcast. But people like you are dominating the field so much, there's no room for the Gord Damien show. The Gord Damien
I should have brought him. We should have had him in here for the book as well, too. We'll get him in.
Okay.
We can talk about the stuff.
We love to do shows together, except he makes fun of me the whole time.
Talk to me about this book. And I just think about, I was, around at this time. Now, truth be told, because my parents were very, very strict, and Maple Leaf games, which are shown here on this network, generally had 8 o'clock start times back in those days, not 7 o'clock or 7:30.
That's right.
And my love was for the Buffalo Sabres.
Oh, really?
Because, one, living in Burlington, kind of halfway in between Toronto and Buffalo in a sense. And their games, if you remember correctly, were on Channel 29. A lot of them on Saturday.
29.
Channel 29.
Holy jeez, we're going back in time here.
I'm an old man, right? So, Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock, playing the Boston Bruins and Ted Darling on the call or whatever. Like, so I could watch a whole game.
Yeah.
Like with the Leaf stuff, I could watch like the first period, and Mom's like, "Dad, bed," right? Yeah. So I could never really see the completion of a game. So my love, and let's be honest, at that time, especially in the mid '70s, the Sabres were a better team. Went to a cup or two.
Yeah, and that was you'll remember. The Sabres were successful right away at a time when the Leafs were not successful.
Yes.
Hunch Imlach had gone to Buffalo after winning 4 Stanley Cups with the Leafs in the 60s. He'd gone to Buffalo and made them a winner. Tim Horton went there. Yep. People forget even a guy like René Robert had been in the Leaf system. So, there was Floyd Smith was with the Leafs as well, or with the Sabres as well. So he'd been in the Frank Mahovlich trade when the Leafs traded Frank Mahovlich to Detroit. I think Floyd Smith.
Wow. Okay.
Anyways, it went back. Anyways, however it went.
Yeah.
It's funny you talk about going to bed. I remember watching Leaf games in the early 70s, and we had a front room and we had a Chesterfield, and the television was there. We had a fake fireplace, and there was always a coffee table in front of the Chesterfield. And I would nestle myself under the coffee table so my father wouldn't see that I was still up and it was 9 o'clock or whatever and the game was on until, just like you, he'd finally say, "Hey, are you still there? Go to bed."
Go to bed.
I know. So those were, it seems so innocent looking back then. And and the thing is, we know it wasn't innocent because of all the stuff we found out about what was going on.
Great point.
Then. But I remember the movie Face Off. Do you remember that? And watching that movie. And I don't think I realized that when I started watching the Leafs, my first Leaf game I went to was 1971. So I wouldn't have realized, because of the way the world was then. I mean, I just read Bob Hanley in the Hamilton Spectator. That's where I got that the Leafs had been champions 4 years earlier. So I just got to know them as Sittler, and then Salming came, and then McDonald was drafted, and that's where it really started. The end of the Dave Keon era, and then the beginning of those guys. So that was when I was growing up and understanding the game and starting to see how it all worked. And so when I got the chance, and Gord and I thought, we decided to do this after Boria died. I'd been trying to reach Gord to do an interview because I wanted his perspective, because I knew he'd known Boria well. And Gord being Gord, he called me back 2 days later, which is not much value for a newspaper guy.
No, I need it now.
So he called me back and we started talking, and we could probably do something on this, because he had seen Boria just shortly before he died. And it really felt like there was some room for something to be written about that team. When we'd done a book on the 67 Leafs, we'd found a lot of what people thought had happened and the way it happened really didn't happen that way. And so we went back, and some of the interviews we got to do, Gord with Inga Hammerstrom, me with Jim McKenney, really some poignant, interesting stories about the players on that team and that team. And I think people look at it and say, well, they didn't win a championship. Why would you write about them? I don't think you have to win to be interesting. That team was tight. I asked Brendan Shanahan a little while ago about Sittler and McDonald and Williams and Boria before he died, still very tight. And I said to him, that's kind of usual, though, for hockey players who played together. And he said, no. The fact that those guys are that tight to this day sets that team apart, even though they didn't win. And I think they're a little bit like the Montreal Expos of the 93 season.
93, yep. It's the end days.
We don't know
Or what could have with the World Series
could have happened.
Yeah, true. That's true.
And with that Leaf team, if Ballard hadn't then ripped it apart after the year or 2 years after they beat the Islanders, what could have happened? Could they have actually gone on, as the Islanders did, to win 4 Stanley Cups? Could the Leafs have achieved something? We'll never know.
And those people forget that Islander team, like that, they were in their prime. Like they were just getting ready. Like they were. I mean, Bossy, Trottier, Smith, Chico, Rush.
So were the Leafs.
And so were the Leafs.
Yeah.
And people forget this, but they had come off as you said, so many bad years, and here was this young crop of Leafs that were really good. Paul Matier was so exciting in net, the popcorn lover. Like you could just think of so many things in that, but yet Lanny coming in off, like I said, with the left-hand side, taking that shot and beating Chico Rush, and you're like, did they just do that?
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, and the fact that you can capture a book, because think about it, the Leafs still haven't won a cup.
No.
And maybe, yeah, I don't know, I won't even go as far as this year, but they haven't won a cup. But you're right about those teams. You think about this era. I think about the Gilmore era, the 91, 92 Burnsy teams. Mm-hmm. I think about the teams Sundin years at early
Pat
2000.
Quinn,
Pat Quinn. So there's 3 teams that went to the semifinals, never won, but to any Maple Leaf, that's what they remember. That's the glory years.
Yeah, and I think it depends what era. I've heard it said that, you know, the music you listen to when you were 13 or 14 is the music that really hits you still. And I think the same is with sports. If you're really into it, what really mattered to you when you were 13, 14, 15, 16 in that area still strikes a chord with you many years later because it mattered to you so much back then. And you didn't know as much. Back then, we didn't know how much the players made or didn't make. We didn't know about, you know, the stuff going on the backs, you know, the behind the scenes. You know, we didn't know about lots of things. And so we just watched the games. And the mythology of sports that existed at that time, that these guys were our heroes and they were all wonderful people, that's the way it was. And the stuff behind, it's like how nobody knew FDR was in a wheelchair. We didn't know about all the other stuff that was going on behind the scenes at that time. So you could just cheer for your team.
You're right. And the fact that you're right, and it's so true, because there wasn't the access to the athletes, you could just formulate in your own mind, kind of like listening to radio, to what your star was. It was whatever you wanted your star to be. It was someone special to you and so memorable for so many, many people. You think about it. Well, let's just transition to the obvious. Your thoughts about the Maple Leafs right now?
Not hardly anybody ever asked me about that.
No, of course not.
Somebody walked down there. So what? Somebody yesterday, I was playing golf as I'm walking to go take some putts. So you think they're going down 4-zip again? I'm like, how would I know? No. I just trying to putt. I think they're a pretty interesting group. Let me give you a couple of things. The way I've kind of changed as I age and I get a little softer in my views. It's only the playoffs matter. I don't believe that anymore, because as my wife and I often chatter about, we watch the Leafs or in the NHL hockey, but predominantly the Leafs, because they're from October to April in the regular season. And since Brendan Shanahan got there, and since Austin Matthews got there with Mitch Marner and William Nylander, they've been a very entertaining team to watch in those winter months when we're sitting at home and we can't go outside a lot of time. And so they have provided a really entertaining team to watch. A team that has then gone on the playoffs and failed. But that doesn't mean the regular season doesn't matter. People only want to think of these things as competitive things sometimes. This is entertainment. You go to a movie, you go to a concert, you go to whatever, you want to be entertained, you want to think, this was worth my time. And I think the Maple Leafs, for a lot of the year, it's worth their time. The challenge is, particularly now, it's a 32-team league, not a 6-team league or a 12-team league or a 20-team league, which makes it really difficult. And getting that the group of players in just the right way to win is really a challenge in a league where there are no great teams anymore. There are just really, really good teams. So like no one can tell me the Vegas Knights are a great team, but they won the Stanley Cup
at the right time,
and they were better than anybody else. So, which brings us back to this Maple Leaf teams. They're a very good team. If they get the goaltending, if their star players score, they could go as far as lots of teams. I think you saw in Game 1, they can be really bad. I think you saw in Game 2, they can be pretty darn good. And I think we're going to be entertained for the rest of this series, whatever happens. And maybe this is again how different. When in the 70s, whether I was watching the Tiger Cats or the whoever, it was just about winning and losing. Now, show me something I find it like that was a great hockey game last night.
It was a great game.
It was a really great game.
Goaltender wrote standard.
Yeah,
and Samsonov was, who we were like, "What? This guy's got to be changed." And then next thing he puts in a 5 saves he made last night were A1, like fantastic stuff, game-saving stuff.
And I think I've come to terms with the fact. So when I started watching the Leafs, as I mentioned it before, I went to my first game. It was I think it was against the Minnesota North Stars, and Cesar Maniego was for Minnesota, and it had been 4 years since the Leafs won the Stanley Cup. What's it now been? 57.
Yeah.
And so it's possible they may not win during my lifetime, and I'm okay with that.
You and I share a love that maybe not everyone can appreciate. I come from a family that we used to wake up. These are the mornings that are real special to me when I think about it. Was breakfast at Wimbledon.
Oh yeah.
And watching the men and women's final was always something in my house that we did. Tennis is a sport that I think not everyone loves, but when the Canadians are going good, it's always a lot of fun right now. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on the tennis world right now? And I just read, I saw on social media today, Bianca Andreescu saying that she's going to play a tournament right before the French. So I guess I guess she's coming back.
And what a great athlete and a really nice person she is. So it's unfortunate that her career has not been able to follow up what she was able to achieve in that whirlwind period. And she became Canada's Athlete of the Year. And as you know, I'm very much involved with the group that decides on who the Athlete of the Year. So that was an exciting year. My parents were English. They grew up playing tennis. That was our sport. I played tennis before I played hockey or lacrosse, as I played a lot in Hamilton, or any other sport. And I remember watching Ken Rosewall and lose to Jimmy Connors and then go through the McEnroe and Borg days. And then all of a sudden, I got to start covering tennis. And from 2000, I think I've got this right, 2002 to 2012, I went to Wimbledon every year for a day. Wow, is right. Not only did I go to Wimbledon, like the press box is right in the corner of center court. So I'm like here and there. And I was there when what they say is the greatest match of the century, Nadal and Federer. I was right there. And people say, whoa, what was that like? The main thing I remember is how dark it was. Because, you would know a lot more better than I how camera lenses, TV camera, they can open up and make it look as though it's bright. It was dark.
Really?
Because there weren't lights.
That's right.
Center court at that time. So I've got to see some of the maybe the greatest era in the history of men's tennis and maybe tennis, which now brings us to today. I think we're all feeling a little bit like Felix and Denis Shapovalov and Bianca and even Layla might have delivered more than they've delivered. So we're feeling a little disappointed. Feels too strong a word because it's so hard to win, but maybe a little disappointed that they haven't yet. The tennis world is adjusting to the absence of Roger. Rafa's still around, but barely. Joker's, finished. Andy Murray's just doing
hanging on.
Yeah, and of course Serena's gone, and all those great. The Williams sisters, one of the great stories in the history of tennis or sport. And so they're all gone, and now we're in this new era. So Canada is viewed, I think, now as a significant tennis nation. Men won the Davis Cup a couple years ago. And we're waiting for probably either one of the people who are there now to emerge as a legitimate star and a Grand Slam winner, or for the next one.
Yeah.
But
I keep waiting for Felix. I think it's there, but
I know. It's just, the line is really, really, really small. And Dennis too. Like, Dennis can be so spectacular, but also so
I think it's here. I think
you're right. So, I mean, look, for me, I grew up loving the game in an era where there were no Canadian players. And then watching, when Daniel Nestor was the only Canadian player. Every tournament he was there by himself playing doubles or playing Davis Cup in some Central American country far away.
When he beat Edberg?
Yeah, that's right. He beat Edberg. So to have these Canadian players of consequence is a wonderful thing. And I actually haven't played the game as much as I had for a while because I really got into golf. And now I'm going to start playing tennis again. So the love never goes away.
Well, that is. I think it's great to see that, because you're right. When the Canadians are doing well, and I feel like it always, she gets knocked for some other things, maybe that's fair or not fair. It kind of started with that Jeannie Bouchard when she started. All of a sudden, when she ends up in the final at Wimbledon, and and it's like, whoa, what happened? And then we got a little taste of success, and I feel like poor Milos grew up in the wrong era, like. He probably would have won a Grand Slam or two if he did not grow up in the era of the big three, really, because he kept having to run into those guys all the time, which is really unfortunate. But
just to one of the nice things about all those players, Jeannie was a bit different, but Milos, I don't know if you've ever met him, wonderful guy, wonderful guy, really nice. Felix, really nice young man. So we've been able to develop great players, but really top people. And Milos, who's still trying, he had the best serve in tennis for a while. He was not, of his era, of the group that came along with him, he was not supposed to make it. And he did, because he's smart, he works hard, he's got a great family support system. I don't know how much longer he's going to keep trying, because when he's done with tennis, he's going to have other things, because he's has lived a well-rounded life. And I've enjoyed knowing him and meeting him. Ran into him a couple years ago, and he was in the Bahamas, and I just happened to be there. And same guy, absolutely the same. So he was, he and Jeannie were the ones we thought, wow, this is going to happen. Jeannie went in a sort of different direction. And then this other era came along. So there'll be another star. At least we have a country now where we produce players, and that's pretty cool.
Well, that's a great thing. I'll finish up on this. We're
going to finish. I'm enjoying.
Yeah, we've had a wonderful chat, Damon. And again, this is a memory for me already. You've done so much. We've talked about the TV, the radio, the writing. You've put together a book here. What's left for you? I mean, I don't know what is. Well,
this is it. This show. Then I'm retiring after this show.
This is it. I'm really proud.
This is like, remember those wrestling matches they used to have? The loser has to quit or leave town.
The loser leave town match.
That's what's going to happen. You win.
I win.
I leave town.
Yes.
Congratulations. There's my memories of Dominic DiNucci and Tony Parise and the Beast anyways, what's left? I don't know. I still do a little radio. I still write some columns. I've got some friends who say, what are you talking about? You're retired. You're still doing this stuff. But I used to do so much more. I think when my association with Sportsnet ended in 2019, I think I've got that right, I think I was kind of burned out. I've been going hard for 30 years, and I think I'd lost a little bit of the fire. So then we went into COVID, and then we've come to this part. And I think I'm not sure when I understand what's going on in the media business there, I'd want to get involved. It's changed so much. I'm not going to say it's better, worse, whatever. It's changed so much. There might be something out there for me that might offer itself out. I don't know. Podcast. There are a few things that people have approached me about, but nothing really jumps. So I like to think I'm on sort of on the second curve looking for something else. And it may have nothing to do with sports journalism, but, or journalism. I mean, I'm in my 5th decade of writing now. It's actually, this will be interesting. It'll be 40 years this December since I wrote my first article for the Toronto Star.
Wow.
That was in 1984. So I got to write in the 80s, the 90s, the aughts, the teens, and now the second roaring 20s. So 5 decades of writing that have taken me around the world. I've met people, I've done things, I can't ask for anything more. I really can't. Mm-hmm. There's not a bitter bone in my body that I'm not on Hockey Night in Canada anymore, or that I'm not working or doing other stuff. It's been such a great run that, I'm happy to just sort of do a little bit, but it's also somebody else's turn. Like I got to, I grew up listening to Norm Marshall do Hamilton Red Wing games. My favorite hockey player's name still is Owen Jelly, who played with Mike Visor and those guys on the Hamilton Red Wings. And reading Bob Hanley in the Hamilton Spectator. And then I got to work with Milt Donnell and Jim Proudfoot and Wayne Parrish and Stephen Brunt on radio
Shaky?
and television, and Jim Hunt and Bob McCowan and Dave Hodge, and on and on and on and on. What could I possibly, so we'll see. I'm not saying I'm done, but I'm looking for other ways to enjoy life, and who knows? Maybe there'll be another book. We'll see.
I can't wait to sink my teeth into that book, because I
think you'll enjoy it.
I think it's going to bring back some memories of the childhood, and I think that's part of the fun of reading a book that actually says revival. So it makes me think of, this is going to be fun to read. So, hey, this has been fantastic and a real honor for me. And as you said, you just listed off some names of people that have inspired you along the way in the business. Let it be known that you inspired me to do what I do right today, and hopefully I'm doing an okay job. So to have you here on this podcast is a real honor for me. So hopefully, hopefully you'd come back. Let's get Gordo on here as well too, because
we'll need a longer show.
Probably.
And you have to be willing to listen to Gord's memories of Partridge Family shows, because almost all his memories are from the very early 70s. But we would have a lot of fun doing that. So it's very kind of you to say the things that you said and to invite me on your show, and maybe we'll do it another time.
Look forward to it.
Okay.
He's a Hamiltonian, folks. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking to people that love sports and that are really charged up about it, enthused by sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline podcast, do want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you do have something to say, please comment. It makes us better. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.